All right, we're live.
So good evening, and thank everyone that's on our call, both in the room and watching live stream. Just a reminder for those that are in the room, this is being live streamed on YouTube as well. I certainly appreciate all that have attended and been able to watch online over these last three sessions. We have gotten a tremendous amount of really good feedback to incorporate into this evolving plan as we kind of go through the next month. So tonight, I think we learned earlier that many people have watched recordings of the presentations prior to, so we're going to move a little more quickly through the presentation part of the meeting. When we're done with that, we'll certainly answer any questions that you may have. In terms of structure of this, as we go through this and present, I'd ask you to, as questions come up in your mind, just go ahead and type those into the chat room. And we will, we have a couple of people on that will either answer them as we go in the chat room, or if, a lot of people have the same question, Mike or Jen Banco will ask me those questions at the end. And then if we have time at the end of the hour here, we'll open it up for you to ask any questions that you might have beyond what has already been discussed. So a couple of just Zoom type of things. You'll be muted by the host, which is Mr. Doherty, while we go through the presentation. We'll do the question session towards the end of the presentation, and then when we open it up, we're going to ask that you raise your hand, and that way we don't have 25 people grabbing onto their mics to speak at the same time. So Mike Doherty, could you just give a quick overview of how you raise your hand, not like this in a Zoom room, but virtually?
Sure. On the participants window that you'll see at the bottom, if you click that, that will open up a list of all the people that are here. You'll be listed as one of those people, and you'll see down at the bottom an option that says raise hand. Click that. A little blue icon will go up next to your name, and I will be able to see that, and so Mrs. Benko. So when the time comes, we can call on you. If your question is answered or you no longer need to raise your hand, there's a button that then shows up that says lower hand. Just go ahead and lower it down so that we know you're all set.
Okay, and so before we jump in, as I said, we have two district administrators on with us this evening that have worked diligently on planning for the reopening with the other members of the administrative team. So just quickly, Mike Doherty and Jen, if you could introduce yourselves, just give an overview of your titles in the district, and then we will get going.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Doherty. I am the Director of Technology and Innovation here at Chagrin Falls. As Dr. Hunt said, we've been working on this plan for probably about 6 weeks now. Mrs. Banco and I have looked at tons of iterations, a lot of different ideas. I'm excited to show you what we have to present to you tonight, and looking forward to your feedback.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jen Banco. I'm the Director of People Services for the district, and I've been working alongside our other administrators to help develop some different options for our students coming back into the fall. In my role, I have responsibility for special education services as well as the other services that are provided to our students on a daily basis.
Okay, so we're going to jump in, and again, thank you for being here. A couple of points I'd like to make before we jump into the presentation is one, the original intention of this was to try to have a contained number that could be more conversational. As kind of feedback came in, there was certainly an interest in opening it up, so we've increased the size to almost 40, which has kind of led to the presentation or the format for our presentation. It does look like we didn't have everyone show up tonight, so maybe people had watched recordings, but we'll certainly give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. The other thing I'd like to make sure is very, very clear. This is one iteration that was developed under the kind of the most stringent of requirements. It was based on the original draft guidance administered by the state of Ohio and Ohio Department of Education, and that included some things that I'll kind of cover in the presentation. So I think if there's one thing we know for sure is this situation is extremely fluid. In fact, you'll see some things in the presentation that we had there last week that are no longer applicable or apply. So this is an opportunity to get feedback, to share kind of some of our thinking, and all of this kind of will roll forward as we come up with the kind of the next iteration of the plan. Also, we'll remind you, we originally had hoped by this session we would actually have Governor DeWine's guidance on the reopening of schools. He was slated to announce that at 2 o'clock today. That again has been pushed to Thursday of this week. That is certainly something that'll drive our thinking and the final plan as well. We had hoped to be able to launch a survey as early as tomorrow morning based on that feedback to really get an understanding of the data in terms of what our parents' interests are in the various models, because data really is going to drive what the final model is. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I want to, obviously COVID-19 is the most significant thing facing our community, our country, and our world. And there's implications for that for school districts, obviously, in terms of our ability to reopen. However, that's not the only issue that is facing the district. And I'll address this quickly. As many of you know, we were slated to be on the ballot for a 7.9 mil operating levy probably in November of this year. That was, after 2017, when we passed the bond and operating issue, we committed to the community we'd be off for 3 years and anticipated to be back. The 7.9 was what we needed to continue to operate with current staffing and programming for at least the next 4 years. Obviously, with the turn in the economy, the board and I, with Treasurer Ashley Brudno, kind of took a step back and said, we need to take into considerations what's going on in our community and in our world from an economic standpoint. So we're in the process of finalizing bringing that millage rate down. In addition to all of that, the governor obviously has a budget gap within this fiscal budget due to COVID-19 impacting the income tax collections. Part of that was to be filled by taking state funding away from public schools in this fiscal year. So when the initial reductions came out, we were looking at about a $534,000 reduction. Due to work of Senator Dolan in getting an amendment into House Bill 164, which was recently signed by the governor, the impact was minimized to about $150,000 for our school district. Again, that's in this fiscal year. So we do know that financial implications out there, and we also anticipate additional revenue cuts from a state perspective coming to next year. So there's a lot of instability in terms of finance, not only in Chagrin Falls, but I think in every school district across the state of Ohio. And we'll continue to balance all of that. And then you add on all of the things that we need to do to be prepared to effectively open school. And there's certainly dollars tied to procuring, the appropriate PPE, preparing our facilities, getting the necessary technology. So there's been, increased costs due to those things. So those are just some of the major issues that we're kind of wrestling with. And I guess I point that out so everyone understands the complexity of this issue. I use this analogy with the Board of Education when I first began the conversation about our reopening. And I really feel that, the analogy of Apollo 13, where you're kind of stuck in space and you have to figure out how to re-enter, where they had to figure out how to put a round object through a square hole, really fits. We've had a traditional school model for many, many years. We've obviously made modifications, and it's kind of the global weave in education, but it's been very, very consistent. And then, all of a sudden in March of this year, we flipped on a dime and we went completely virtual. And I commend our students and our staff and our parents really for getting through that wave. But the reality to reopen under, different requirements and what all of the concerns that are out there has created quite a challenge. One in which we're going to have to work together to come up with an option that best meets the needs of our students. And that's certainly a difficult challenge. And I think hopefully by the end of tonight you'll understand some of the complexities that go into it. So when we look at this complex problem, there's really three areas that you need to be considering when we discuss the reopening of school. Obviously, there's the public health considerations, the health and safety of our staff and our students. The idea of potentially having to practice 6 feet social distancing within a school environment, wearing cloth face coverings, minimizing transitions, looking at not having any type of large gatherings and alternative ways that we would normally do business. That there's a whole litany of challenges from the public health standpoint. There's obviously some educational concern as well. We heard it from you in the parent surveys, and we believe it strongly that there's no replicating the experience of face-to-face interacting with teachers. And that's not only from a content standpoint and a learning standpoint, but the social emotional development. So we heard loud and clear from the surveys as we were going through even the remote experience that FaceTime, even if it's virtual, is very, very important, and we needed to do more of that. The idea that, interaction amongst peers is part of the educational experience is another educational consideration to make. And then the continuation of high quality instruction for our students. And the model that we created, we kind of came to the realization or commitment that our encore elective classes are vitally important into the development of what we offer to kids. And we needed to try to keep them as much as possible kind of coming back into a return or reopen scenario. And then there's obviously community considerations, and that's really where we're at now. We're trying to hear from our community, conduct this really thorough survey to understand how does this impact our families, so we can come up with a scenario that best meets the needs of our students and community and staff as well. So we know you need a reliable, consistent schedule, that we need to communicate that as soon as we can, and that obviously this community has supported its schools, and it doesn't matter what model you're in, whether it be full students coming to school, completely remote learning, or some type of hybrid. We have to kind of provide a very rigorous, well-rounded education. So that remains a priority. So those are really the three buckets that we are considering and working through as we attempt to solve the problem. So one of the things that I made the decision, I guess it was about a week and a half ago now, to roll out a model to the Board of Education, knowing very well that it was likely going to look different and be different by the time we got to August. But I felt it was important to start the conversation, or we were going to miss the window in which our board could offer feedback and our community could offer feedback. So part of, I guess, our frustration is we have not received final guidance from the state of Ohio, the Ohio Department of Education, on what our reopening should look like. I will say, even in the last couple of days, there's been additional guidance coming out from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Got something from the Cleveland Clinic today. Was on the phone yesterday with someone at the clinic that giving us some feedback. And I know UH has a team that's helping school districts as well. And I've set up a time to kind of run through our scenarios with them. So I think the guidance is definitely getting stronger. It's just, I guess, later than I wish, it would have come. So on the screen right now is an overview of the guidelines in terms of their release. We anticipated or heard that they would come, in May 15th, that they would be out kind of last week of June. The guidance that came out the last week of June had 6 feet social distancing within the health required, masks on every student, and 24 students per bus. So when you start to think about those numbers, what you can actually transport to school, and what you can do to try to recognize and honor the social distancing within the constraints of our facilities, that led us to kind of beginning the planning of a hybrid model as a potential that we would need to have in place for the opening of school. So on June 1st, we were told we should have the guidance from the state. And from June 1st to June 22nd, I can't tell you how many different days we anticipated it coming out. And even if you look at this slide, I believe in here somewhere it says June 30th as of today. We thought it was coming out today, and it was put on hold. I'm very hopeful that on Thursday, the governor will release this, and this will continue. This will help us inform what the next iteration of our model looks like. So we're going to talk about the educational side. We're going to talk about the impact on parents. But I think it's important to know that we are kind of having parallel paths in terms of planning. And I'm not going to read the slide to you, but we are making investments in the necessary equipment to disinfect and prepare our facilities, looking on cleaning maintenance plans based on best practices. And that's a whole other path that is proceeding in the district to ensure that we're ready to open school for students in whatever capacity that we feel is safe and appropriate for kids. Same thing goes with the PPE, everything from infrared thermometers, hand sanitizers, masks, necessary cleaning products. All of that is being procured now, and we're getting in line so we have those things ready when we have to open school. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here tonight. Maybe we'll come back in another forum and really focus on what the environment would look like. But I felt it was really important that our parents understand that we are looking at that side of things as well. So with a problem of this complexity, I found myself very often getting frustrated about the things that we did not know. And I had, kind of a moment where I needed to take a step back and just say, okay, what do we know at this given moment in time, and what can we do based on that information? So what we know is school has to restart in August. The governor's been very, very clear about that, and we all know the economic realities that surround that, as well as some of the educational concerns that we have for our kids. We know that COVID-19 will still be in our community, and there will not be a vaccine come the fall. And unless the data has changed in the last 48 hours, that Cuyahoga County is the second highest in terms of the number of cases in the state of Ohio. So those are realities we know. So we certainly need to consider the safety precautions, health recommendations, and cleaning protocols as we prepare for our opening. And it became, very clear even in May when we started these conversations, we needed, a couple of plans. We needed a plan for full return. That means as many students as, can come or want to come will come. And what do we have to have in place for that? And so that, that plan really is about cleaning and sanitizing, limiting transition from classroom to classroom, trying to keep kids as stagnant as possible, avoiding any kind of large gatherings. So those are the types of things that in a full return model, we're looking at and planning for. If you, consider a full remote learning plan, so that's if we have an outbreak and we need to, go back to a full remote learning environment, or we do know we have students out there with health concerns or parents that are concerned about a return. We do know we'll have a percentage of our students that will be make the choice to be in a remote learning environment. We also know that, based on the feedback, we needed to improve that model. Again, I think everyone did a great job with this, dramatic a change as we experienced in March, but we needed to up our game in terms of our ability to live stream, our ability to have a consistent schedule and interaction with kids. And we've purchased the next necessary technology now to improve that remote learning. And probably the one that's getting the most attention and conversation and is the most difficult to solve is the hybrid model, where due to whatever social distancing requirements we believe are appropriate and or social distancing requirements that we're mandated to have, we cannot bring all students at one time. And that's the hybrid model as we refer to it, and where a percentage of our students can come in and a percentage of our students would be remote, and that would kind of change depending on the model. We've looked at about 30 iterations of hybrid models, and we've considered everything from what we'll share with you tonight to every other day to a 4-day-a-week. There are a lot of things that go into considering kind of the pros and cons of each of these. Tonight, we'll talk about some of the pros and cons of the model that we've decided to kind of share out. But again, remember, this is a kind of evolving situation, and I would suggest that our model will look very, very different when it comes August. So what we still don't know, we don't know the final federal, state, and local restrictions regarding social distancing, masks, and things of that nature. We have not heard from our parents in terms of concerns, and this is an opportunity for our parents to at least hear about the thinking, hear about the complexity of the problem, and give some feedback. So we're doing that now. We'll also have these conversations with our staff over the next couple of weeks. And then, what the future months look like, we're seeing a steady increase in cases right now. You've all watched the data over the news. It can change dramatically very quickly. So what we know today on June 30th may be completely different on August 15th. And if I could, I guess plant the seed for all of us right now as parents, and even as educators that are out there, we need to be prepared to pivot at any given moment. We need to be prepared to move into a remote environment if that's what is necessary to maintain the health and wellness of our students and our staff. So that it's a very fluid situation, which I think likely will cause a very fluid instructional delivery model, and certainly through the opening of next year. So quickly through kind of where we have been, if virtual learning happened March through the end of or early June. We did 2 surveys during that time, one to inform kind of what we were doing kind of in the moment, and we heard loud and clear an additional face-to-face instructional time was necessary in what we were doing. And we're also using that data to drive the models that we have created. In about mid-May, we had a group of administrators start to look at the various possibilities of a hybrid model. We chose to keep teachers and building principals out of that at that time, just because they were needed to focus on closing out the school year with kids. As soon as school let out, we had building design teams made up of teachers and administrators come together, review the various models that we created and give feedback and structure. And then we took all of that and made a proposal to the Board of Education, and some modifications were made coming out of those design team meetings, and a lot of that was due to the necessity to align these models from a K-12 perspective. So we're we're right where that arrow is right now, where we've proposed a model, one we know has certainly pros and cons, and we're getting feedback on all of this from our community at this time. So using all of that feedback, the survey data that we'll gather next week will come together, hopefully with the guidelines that are released on Thursday, and improve the iteration of what we're currently looking at in terms of a reopening. I would love to be able to recommend a final model towards the end of July, so our parents had a really clear understanding of what every aspect of this looked like, and conduct almost kind of a COVID registration where we reach out to each of our parents and say, okay, where are you going to fall in terms of these offerings? So that's an overview of where we've been, a little bit about where we're going. I will quickly go over these. The first thing we did, rather than dive in trying to solve whether we should be a half day or every other day, was to develop some core beliefs and guiding principles. And these really guided the work since the beginning of this situation. So obviously we believe the safety and well-being of students needs to be at the forefront of our work, and it's our responsibility to provide the best possible environment for both staff and students going forward. The partnership with our parents has never been more important. Trust me, I'm very, very thankful when I hear of some of the issues that my colleagues have dealt with. I mean, there were school districts that never got internet service or equipment to students that are hanging out there this spring. So that partnership is going to be vitally important, as we realize, especially when you look at hybrid models. There's no one perfect situation. There's an element of disruption with all of those, and there's sacrifices that have to be made from a school education perspective, as well as a parent perspective as well. Obviously, we believe in the academic side of learning, but we've never been solely about that. The social emotional development is a critical component to what we focus on and we provide here at school, and we need to continue to do that. There is a conversation to be had on what are the priorities here, the health and safety versus the social emotional, and that's certainly a balance that I have to work through with the Board of Education, because it really is one big driver in terms of where we will land with this. Obviously, we know students have unique learning needs. Some students flourished. I had parents contact me saying, we may just remain remote because academically, we really saw our student get more engaged and have a great deal of success online, whereas others felt like this can't end quick enough. We need to get them back to school. So we need to understand that there's various learning styles, and we need to understand that this impacts parents in a variety of ways as well. And then we've constantly strived to seek opportunity in this crisis. So in hopes of when we're back to quote unquote normal, we actually never go back to the way things were. We've used this as a learning experience to improve what we do educationally for our kids moving forward. So let me just quickly kind of talk through the three possibilities. There's a possibility of a full day return. So that's an in-person model for all students that can, and parents feel comfortable sending them to school. What we know about those right now is obviously we will implement all of the necessary cleaning and sanitation requirements. There's a picture there of a desk divider that we've purchased to put on every desk throughout the school district, whether that's masked or in mask. I would say it's going to be masked to some extent for sure. And we've started to look at room configurations to provide as much social distancing as possible. You need to understand that numbers matter with this. So if I have 10% of my students, or if our students say they will return solely in a remote learning model, that gives me X percentage of students that want to come in a full day. If that number is 30% that want a remote model, obviously I can bring, it makes more social distancing and the ability to bring others in full day. So that's why this survey is so critical at this moment. But this is a full day model. Essentially, we bring as many kids as we can in. We do as much as we can to provide social distancing. But I want to be transparent, honest. If we had the vast majority of our student population at 1,900 students come in, 6 foot total social distancing is not feasible. And even if you read some of the American Academic of Pediatrics, maybe that's not even the best recommendation. So I think it's important to point that out. Second would be full remote. In this model, students do not attend school. Their education is completely virtual. We have invested in technology and training to improve offering for our students. We provide both synchronous and asynchronous education on a regularly scheduled day with live interaction with teachers. So we've gotten some questions on can you provide more clarity there? Again, the numbers of students that are in that environment will help us determine exactly what that would look like. So if we have a very small percentage of students that are in this environment, it could look one way. If we have a significant number, let's just throw out 25 or 30%, which is the state average right now. If you look at the Fallon results, that means we'd actually probably dedicate teachers solely to this environment. So we need that data to help kind of provide you with the detail I know many parents want. And then the hybrid model, which is the most complex, we've already talked a little bit about it. Mike and Jen will talk through kind of what our proposal is as it stands right now. That we certainly need some tweaks and changes, and we continue to work on it. If I know anything, that the model we're going to share with you today will definitely not be the model we're going to open with, because it will move and change. And we feel really good on the elementary side about most things. Secondary wise, we'd like to see the instructional minutes improve. So there's some tweaks that we need to do there. I want to be clear in that last kind of paragraph in the survey that you're going to receive next week. We're going to give you the opportunity to weigh in even on hybrid models. So although we're going to present a half-day model to you here in a few minutes, you will have the opportunity to weigh in on, and I see the value in the half-day, but just from a logistics standpoint, and every other day model would be better. You can weigh in and respond that way on the survey. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to let Jen Banco, Mike Doherty walk through the elementary model. Jen Banco will walk through the secondary model. Again, one more time, just note it says draft at the top. And these were really built in a way that I think there's a lot of substance there from an educational perspective, but a lot of detail and change that would have to be made before we open school with this kind of model. So Mike, why don't you cover Gurnee Elementary?
Sure. So as we look at the Gurnee model, what you're seeing here is half the students in the morning, and then the other half of the students in the afternoon. And they're in every day of the week, 5 days a week. What we really like about this model is this gives students time to get into a routine. They're seeing the same teacher and the same 10 to 11 kids every single day, which allows them to help build relationships with those students as opposed to an every other day model. Other things we like about this, this avoids lunch and recess, which are very high risk activities in this current scenario. So not doing a lunch and recess will help keep the kids safe. Educationally, students would come in and get a 90-minute block of literacy, a little bit of a break, and then a 60-minute block of math. You can see as kind of the graphic is moving, we've integrated Encore 1 day a week for each grade level. So depending on the grade that your student is in, the Encore kind of moves day to day to day. When they're not in school, they're at home working on science and social studies. Those are lessons that are typically more individualized and can be done on their own. They'll also have their iReady pathways to work on and any kind of teacher reinforcement things that might come through. The other thing we really like about the half day, all day, or half day, everyday model is this allows us to bring students with special needs or intervention. We can keep them in for a longer period of time if that's what we need to do in order to make sure that we're getting through all of their services. Dr. Hunt, will you go to the next page so we can look at the schedule? So this is the sample student schedule for a Cuyahoga County student. So they would arrive at school around 8:30. Again, have that literacy block for 90 minutes, a brief class activity, and then the math block for another 60 minutes, followed by packing up and then heading home. And then for this particular grade level, encore would be on Friday. While these students are in class, the Geauga County students would be at home working on science and social studies, working on their iReady pathways, etc. Let's take a look at the intermediate school. So the intermediate school is a similar model. One big thing to note on the intermediate school is the start time. So start time for the IS would be at 7:20, which is about an hour earlier than usual. I know that we'll talk about this later, but in order to make the transportation work, we needed to move the start time up for the intermediate school students. So in this model, just like Gurney, they have a rotating encore block on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Students would come in for both ELA and math. And then while they're at home, the big difference here is that they'll actually receive face-to-face teacher-led instruction on science and social studies. So there will be blocks of time that are already scheduled out where they will connect with their teacher, and their teacher will be teaching to them face-to-face over Zoom. They'll also have additional work through ELA and other things to work on. Just like at Gurney, again, for the intervention and special needs students, we're able to bring those students in for a full day in this model. Dr. Hunt, if you go forward one slide, we can look at an intermediate school sample student. So here's one from Geauga. The Geauga student would wake up in the morning and again have those face-to-face dedicated teacher-led sessions on science and social studies, and also work on some ELA stuff, get themselves prepared. Then they would arrive at school at 11:20 to receive math and ELA instruction. So I know we're going to let Jen go ahead and talk about the 712 model, and then we can answer any questions you have about what we just went through.
Okay, when we look at the middle school and the high school models, you'll notice that there's some similarities between the two. One of the key things that we need to work around at the secondary level is that we do have shared staff members who work at both buildings. So it's important that we try to align schedules as much as we can. So looking specifically at the middle school, you'll notice that students are in the building every day for a half day. They basically attend 2 of their class periods each day and have built-in intervention time on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And on Wednesday, there is flexible grouping to allow for additional instructional opportunities. So that might be something like an additional science lab. That might be some of the social emotional curriculum that is normally done at the middle school level. As Mike noted, again, at the secondary level, our special education services and intervention services will take place all day long, so some students will stay for a full day. When a student is not in school, the remote learning component for the middle school student will look like attending 2 classes from home each day. You'll note that class periods are 75 minutes in length. It is not the expectation at this point that a student would just sit in front of their computer for the full 75 minutes. As teachers design their instructional periods, they will be managing both students that are live in the classroom as well as students that are at home learning. So it is anticipated that there'll be a routine schedule so that perhaps all remote learning students will log in about halfway or about a half hour into the instructional block and then get direct instruction from the classroom teacher at that point. If you want to flip to the next slide, you can see a student schedule, so it might make a little bit more sense. Okay, let's flip to the high school schedule. Very similar to the middle school schedule, with the exception of Wednesdays. High school students would not come in. This would be an all virtual day for students. So a high school student would attend 4 days a week, either morning or afternoon. The other big difference between middle school and the high school is that when students are not live in class, and they are at home learning, they will be live streaming into their classroom. So we anticipate that high school students will spend more time in this live instruction than any other building, and developmentally that's appropriate. They have a more sustained attention and can attend to instruction for longer periods of time. The high school continues to work in Tiger Period, which again provides them opportunities for teachers to meet with students for intervention and enrichment. It also gives the high school a vehicle to deliver other programming, the types of things that might typically happen during class meetings or assemblies as well. And the next slide will highlight a student schedule. One thing to note about the high school also is that the high school will operate on an open campus model, meaning that students will only need to be in the building when they have class. So looking at this schedule, this gives you an example of a Geauga County student. You'll notice that they are in person in the afternoons. So for example, on Tuesday, they have only one class, so they would only need to be on campus for biology from 1:35 till 2:50. So they'll be able to come and go as needed. And I think that's it.
Okay, so some of the advantages and certainly disadvantages as well. Eliminating lunch and recess, we think, is a benefit from a health standpoint. We feel good about the instructional time and the frequency in which students would be interacting, especially at the at the elementary level. We believe that the repetition and frequency of instruction leads to further mastery, and that we have the necessary room within the buildings to bring our targeted students in that need intervention and special education services all day. We believe the model continues to support and build relationships with peers and teachers more quickly. Obviously, one of the things we did not share, but to pull off the transportation issue of this model, we would likely have to cut busing at grades 9 through 12. So busing would be for grades K through 8. I'm gonna go to next steps, and then we'll open it up. Mike, you can facilitate some of the questions, and we'll open it up for the participants in the meeting. So our next steps, really the survey next week. If obviously you can make the time to sit down as a family and really think through what those, what decisions are best for you as a family. That survey will really drive where we go in terms of the final model. We are going to introduce school year calendar modifications to the Board of Education at the next meeting. I'm not ready to say that we're going to change our start date. The state of Ohio mandates that I have a public hearing on a calendar 30 days before a calendar can be changed. I also need to work through that with our union. So I want to get a calendar out there that we are considering, and we'll certainly keep you informed as that process moves forward. Obviously, we would need to present a recommendation for the Board of Education before we kind of finalize it and bring that to our parents. And then, the preparation of facilities, transportation, student schedules, all of that still needs to happen. And we believe we've got some revision and continue to work on the secondary model, even if everything were to hold kind of as is right now in terms of these recommendations to look at instructional time for our kids in the secondary level. So with all of that, that's about as quick as we could get through it. Mike, Jen, are there questions that are in the chat that you haven't been able to respond to?
Yep, I was trying to grab the one I was looking for. I'm just trying to find it here. Okay, here we go, Bob. It's a little bit long, but I'm going to read the whole thing to you. Says, the American Academy of Pediatrics released guidelines to the public about school reopening, and they say the ability to monitor viral transmission and adapt in real time is a key principle. What safety/efficacy metrics are you going to be monitoring, and how? In designing the proposed schedules, have you considered how easy it will be to modify them in real time in order to either increase or decrease the number of students on campus?
Yeah, so the last part of that is yes, we have, and we all need to be ready to pivot. even, it doesn't even have to be the whole district, going virtual. It could be one building that needs to be prepared to pivot. The goal would be that you have a schedule. Let's say you're kind of an all-in student. I want to come as much as possible, that you would have a schedule for a full day. You would have a schedule for remote as well. So you would know that going right out of the gate. And I would say for all students, we are going to ensure that we are incorporating as much blended learning or online learning, even once the students are here, so they're familiar with the tools and can transition very quickly. In terms of the protocols and practices, that's really going to be worked through with our partners in the healthcare. One of my frustrations that as this has evolved at the state level, as the guidance seems to get more general, is that they're pushing the decisions on local school boards. And I don't have a doctor in infectious disease on my school board. We need that support from the medical community to make sure that we have all those protocols in place. And we've made the appropriate connections to get that work done over the next month or so before the opening. So we're going to lean into those professionals and do the best we can. Specific to, and I had a question earlier today in the community forum about, temperature checking. Will we take, care of that? Is that something we're going to ask our parents to do? That's one of those recommendations that may or may not come out from the governor's office, in which we have to react to. Originally, they put that responsibility back on parents, and maintaining journals and checking temps. We just have to work through whether that we feel comfortable with that, or if we think we want to try to accomplish that at school. I will tell you, we all own the responsibility with our children to kind of monitor any symptoms that they may demonstrate, and we're going to make this very clear coming into the year. We need you as partners to help protect our, each other, our staff as well. So some of that is unknown, but is slated, the work to get done for sure.
Another one for you, Dr. Hunt. On a virtual only model at Gurnee, where there'll still be an opportunity for the individualized learning that we've grown to love, meaning currently how some students get more help in certain areas or more advanced work in small groups.
Yeah, so the answer to that is a little bit, I'm not sure right now to what level. Obviously, we believe in that very, very much. And I think we did, as much as we could. And I commend the Gurnee staff. The elementary in a complete virtual model is the most challenging, just because of the level of dependence some of those students will have on their families. I think if we have more kids in and we have dedicated staff, we can certainly be more creative in that environment to kind of personalize and create interaction opportunities. But by the time you get kind of the decision point here at the end of July, where we need you to commit virtual to a remote learning or hybrid or full day, we're going to very clearly be able to articulate this is exactly what it's going to look like, and these are the things that we will have in place for your students.
There were a couple related to ventilation. I'm just going to read the one to you. Is there a plan for mitigation of? Sorry, my chat moved. Mitigation of risk that will involve opening of windows, modification to the airflow, et cetera, in the buildings?
Yeah, I was actually just trying to pull up an email and I can't find it right now, but actually we got a study from a board member, even I think it was Monday of this week, talking about opening of doors and windows, and there's a balance with that and safety as well. But Mr. Woofter has worked with our HVAC in terms of how to increase the kind of bringing in outside air in through the buildings, and we're looking at those settings as we speak. So we're going to do everything we can from a ventilation standpoint. And if whoever that might be, if you want to send me an email, if you really know this stuff, I can forward you kind of the things that he is doing and working on specifically, so you have that information.
I'm going to do one more from chat, Bob, and then we have someone with their hand up. The question is about essentially, do we plan to get the rigor of the coursework back to where it was pre-COVID?
I mean, that's every expectation is to be there. I don't want to, I don't want to mislead folks. I think one of the things that makes us such a special school district is the level of interaction that we have from a social emotional standpoint with our staff. And when you cut that either in half or, every third day, whatever that is, there's some element of impact there. But certainly the amount of direct instruction and the academic rigor, I believe will be kind of raised just simply by giving our teachers being able to bring them into the school and work from their classrooms, and then two, providing the technology to make it an acceptable experience for both the staff and the students is without question going to raise the rigor and the effectiveness.
Okay, Joanne, thank you for being patient. I know you've had your hand up for a little while. If you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, that would be great.
Great, thanks, Mike. Hi, Bob. I have a quick question around Excel Tech. So my son has been accepted to the interactive media program next year at Excel Tech that he's certainly very excited about. How's that going to work? And I know you don't have the complete answer yet, but best to your knowledge.
Actually, this is one I can answer with a little more confidence than some of the others. I had a meeting with the Excel Tech superintendents last week. Actually, those programs are in much better shape than the traditional classroom because they have a lot more square footage. So the anticipation is those programs will run kind of as is. The things that may impact those programs are various districts are going to be moving start dates around. So we've all agreed to kind of open our Excel Tech programs within a week window, so that doesn't put the students in a position. And then our Cuyahoga Geauga model, if that were to fly, those students need to get certain credits at our high school. So if you don't fall into the right half of the day, that could be an issue. We've looked at those conflicts, and I think they're less than a handful, and we would just have to work through flipping those students into the morning so they can get to their program. So I feel very good about the students that are in those programs, that they'll both be able to access their graduation requirements as well as their programs.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I believe we have answered every question in the chat. If there's anybody else that wants to raise their hand and ask one, I think we have a little bit of time for that. Mrs. Banco, if you think I missed one in the chat, please let me know.
I think we got them all.
Oh, all right, we got a hand up. It says Cardinal Credit Union, so I'm going to just say go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering about sports. My son's going into 7th grade, and I know he is very excited to start football, and I know that usually starts in August. Thank you.
Yeah, I think part of the frustration and part of the confusion is with what has been allowed to open and run in our society and in our schools and what has been denied. I will tell you that the Ohio High School has been very aggressive. In fact, we've kind of held back on the reins a little bit in terms of some of our preseason work, but they've been very aggressive in moving forward. So as of today, things stand. It's almost like the Ohio High School released that they were playing football quicker than the NFL made the decision. So maybe that's just the Ohio football, I guess. But as of today, those programs at the high school level are doing with a kind of a phased-in model in which they're allowed to, work with smaller groups of kids when they're actually allowed to touch, the equipment, things of that nature, and they are moving forward. So I would anticipate if things continue to move in that direction, sports would continue. However, I would put it on your radar. It would not shock me if, especially in time when things are, spiking, that is kind of pulled back. But as of today, sports are moving forward.
Hey, Bob, real quick, this was one that came up earlier, right along the same sports line. Does the same plan apply to middle school sports as well?
Yes. Any other questions in the chat, Mike?
One last one. If a significant number of families say every other full day would be more workable than a half-day model for working parents, can you speak to what that might look like?
Yeah, I mean, we've ran that model. So essentially that's what it would be every other day. Now we would have to be very cognizant of, there's things that we have to provide to teachers because, they need time to plan and prepare. I'm not sure an every other day model would fly with the requirements that we have to provide planning time. So it might be a 4-day model where you go every other day for 4 days, and then you're either, virtual or remote for a day. So it very well could look like that. I think one of the concerns we have in that environment is you have a student, elementary students who come on a Thursday, they might not be back until the following Monday or Tuesday. There's just a lot of time in between, and we know routine and consistency at that level is really important. But yeah, this is a balance, no question. What's best educationally has to be balanced with what it does to our parents, at home. So that data will be certainly inform, which direction we go.
One more here for you, Dr. Hunt. Kindergarten students received a letter that full-day kindergarten is no longer a possibility. Even if some are remote, is that still what's being planned?
Yeah, we are not planning on bringing students, as of right now, back in a full day environment in which we feel comfortable, comparing it to a half day where in the past we've charged the separation of that model. Has it or could that change? It absolutely could change if we decide to go all in, depending on what those numbers look like. I believe when we, informed parents that we weren't going to collect tuition, that we did say that if, we ended up coming back into a full day situation, we would prorate that and offer that. But for me, there has to be a clear delineation between what students are getting in a full day program versus a half day program if we're going to charge our parents. And really, that's one of those questions that is kind of up in the air until we finalize the model that we're going with.
Tara, I know that Mrs. Banco is working to answer your question right now. Is there anything else before we wrap this one up?
Okay, so just in closing, I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight. Those that are not only in our meeting here but watching virtually at home. I'll reiterate that the survey next week is of critical importance because it's going to drive where we go, and that this is a starting point and not an ending point. So your feedback, your participation is very much appreciated. We kind of rolled this out because I was concerned at the distance between when we had last communicated. I know this is something that creates some anxiousness at home, so we wanted to start the conversation. We are likely kind of through July going to continue to host and offer up these opportunities where we just kind of update you on where we're at. I'm not sure we're going to have all the answers until maybe the day before we open, but we want to keep you involved in the conversation as we go forward. And certainly share updates. We believe, if you want to watch out for Thursday afternoon, we believe the guidance from the state will come out, and we'll balance that guidance with the other expertise that we are engaging with to try to make the best possible decisions we can. So thank you very much for being on tonight, and appreciate that, and we'll continue to keep you posted as things evolve.